The Secrets of Star Wars is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give.
You're listening to The Secrets of Star Wars, Episode 27.
Hello there.
It's a power that Jedi have that lets them control people and make things float.
Impressive. Every word in that sentence was wrong.
Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope.
This station is now the ultimate power in the universe.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
It's against my programming to impersonate a deity.
That's not how the Force works.
Force is with me, and I am with the Force, and I fear nothing.
Remember, the Force will be with you, always.
Hi, I'm Father Andrew Kinstetter, a.k.a. Father Fett, and you're listening to The Secrets of Star Wars, where we talk about everything connected to that galaxy far, far away. From movies to books to TV shows and more, we're looking at the deeper themes and meanings found in Star Wars. And so today we are discussing the first 2 episodes of Star Wars The Mandalorian. So if you haven't seen the first 2 episodes, I'd recommend you stop listening to us, go watch the episodes, and come back and join us. So joining me today on our panel is, first up, we have Mike Creevy. Hello there, Mike.
Hey, Father. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty awesome. Next, we have Andrew Hermes. Hi there, Andrew.
Hey, Father. Glad to be here.
Awesome. Third, we have Thomas Sanjurjo.
Nicely done with the name.
Oh, thanks. And last but certainly not least, we have Angela Cialana.
Yes, you got it right. Hello there.
To be honest with you, I listened to our previous podcast to make sure that I was getting those names right.
Perfect.
So today we are discussing the first 2 episodes of The Mandalorian. And so first off, this is just something super exciting. It's something Star Wars hasn't ever done before, a live action TV show. So it's always fun to just kind of get first impressions. Was it what you expected? Was it not? I know for me, when I first watched it, I loved the gritty feel of it. It definitely had kind of an original trilogy feel, with the props and all of the look. It also was quite a bit smaller in scale than I think I was initially expecting, especially with Jon Favreau kind of leading it. I sort of just equate him with the Marvel grand, sort of movie layouts. But this was very small scale, which is also a really cool thing to do within the Star Wars universe. So I'm interested to hear your guys's. Angela, what were you kind of thinking in terms of first impressions?
I honestly did not know what to expect. I didn't want to give myself these, I didn't want to have any expectations really going in, but I was expecting some kind of quality because I know Dave Filoni does amazing work. And of course, Jon Favreau and everybody else. So my first impression was I love that they showed and they didn't tell. There was that feeling of Star Wars that I fell in love with. And I loved that we got the Force from the very first episode.
Awesome. Yeah. Thomas, what about you?
In the middle of watching the very first show, I turned around and looked at my wife and I said, "This is Star Wars." And I have been very disappointed in the last 2 movies to come out. And so this really hit that feeling exactly right for me. And I can't tell you what it is. I couldn't write down in a script what you have to do to meet that standard for me. But this definitely touched that right nerve or that right tone for me.
Awesome. Yeah, I agree with you. Andrew, how about you?
Yeah, it circumvented a lot of expectations that I thought I had about the show. I think it started out immediately, like you guys are saying, it feels like Star Wars. It's like we're from the first scene. It's like we're back in the world. I mean, it's a fight inside of a bar. It's all too familiar territory. And again, I love the grittiness, the whole Western type vibe of the show.
Mm-hmm.
But as we see in the reveal at the end, I know we're gonna get into more with the child, as episode 2 is titled, with Baby Yoda. it turns into something that I didn't think we were going to get into. I'm glad that they, throughout all the marketing, they were able to hide that. I think that was key. And instead of like, when you think the Mandalorian, they're warriors, they're meant for battle, and but now it's turning into like a lion and cub sort of story, and it's interesting to see where it's going to go, but I love it so far.
Yeah, I think that relationship between Baby Yoda, as we're all calling him, and the Mandalorian, I think is going to be an awesome story to see play out. Mike, what about you?
I agree with what everybody said pretty much so far, and I haven't had a whole lot of chance to watch as much sort of behind the scenes. Well, there's not a whole lot of that, but some of the panels and interviews and stuff, but I've seen a few of them. I know that Angela sent a link to one, and then there was another one, I think after the first episode came out, that had a lot of really neat insight in it. But, they were saying in that, and I was thinking the same thing, that really just the aesthetic of it, I really feel like every frame of this show is something you could print. It's like, yeah, it's just artistically very beautiful. And again, you have that fight as the first scene. There's action right off the get-go, but there's also kind of like I don't know, there's like a better pace, I feel, to it. There's a better, almost like meandering, kind of like you're just sort of like tagging along, Mm-hmm. And I just kept feeling myself sort of drawn into the story, which I think for me at least always feels like a sign of just good storytelling. If it's something I don't feel like I'm watching it, I feel like I'm in it, right. And that however they do that, that's takes me back to my childhood too,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I liked, Angela, what you said about the fact that this is it's showing us, not telling us. I don't know if you guys were paying attention or not, and we'll get into this as we jump into the second episode, but for the whole, at least the first 10 minutes or so of the second episode, there was not a word spoken. And so we're just sort of just along for the ride. And even the Mandalorian himself doesn't talk a whole lot, which I think is really cool. It adds sort of I want to know this character more, but it's sort of a metaphor almost. You gotta get through his armor. Like he's got the walls up, and I kind of like that image and that look, but he obviously, we see in that very first scene, which kind of lays out the whole where this is going, at least in the first episode of that. He's getting the bounty on that ice planet he captures Mithril and has this fight in the cantina, and he kind of brutally murders one of the characters in that bar, and so we see that side of him. But then when he encounters, again, jumping ahead a little bit, the baby Yoda, there's a sense of compassion there that, okay, what is this guy all about? So, I'm really excited to kind of see that story play out. I love to kind of get into human nature and kind of how that plays out, and to see
it's really interesting there too. Like, not only is he silent, but there's no visual connection with the character because it's a faceplate that's there. And that's like on top of just not having many words, there's no emotion to read either.
Yeah. That takes tremendous just acting talent, I think, to the body. It's all body language.
I found it quite funny when he captures Mithril and brings him onto the ship, that Mithril, I think, sort of might be analogous to us, that he's uncomfortable with the silence and he starts to over explain everything.
It was like a really bad Uber ride.
Yep.
I just hope that I hope I don't find carbonite slabs in the trunk of my Uber.
Yes. By the way, did you catch the holiday special reference?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes. Yeah,
I couldn't believe it.
That was
the Life Day.
I was like, John Favreau just made Life Day canonical.
Yeah, that was pretty awesome.
Although I was kind of confused.
Boba Fett was introduced.
That's a Wookiee holiday, right?
Yeah, but it seems to have been bigger than that, and it's also and it's where Boba Fett was introduced. So I think that's where we're coming back to talking about some of this, the strangeness of Star Wars, because Boba Fett has all of 2 lines in Empire Strikes Back, but he instantly became everyone's absolute favorite character. And it was because, and the only reason he was in Empire Strikes Back was because he appeared in that Christmas special, and then he was so well liked that they kind of threw him into a real role, and then from there developed into all this other stuff.
There was actually, I mean, of course, there was the Life Day reference, but there's also just his rifle.
Yeah,
is also very iconic of the holiday special,
and it's so much cooler than I thought it was going to be. By the way,
yes. Well, and he uses it to take out that creature that's attacking their ship as he's trying to leave that ice planet. So yeah, I might have to go back and watch that cartoon part of the holiday special, not the whole thing. It's pretty difficult to get through. So yeah, so we have the Mandalorian. He captures Mithril. He immediately freezes him in carbonite in this like portable carbonite freezing chamber, which I didn't even know was a thing. I sort of expected this massive, Bespin sort of contraption for that, and takes him back to wherever the bounty hunter guild is hanging out. I don't actually know what planet that is, and drops off all the bounties, and that's where we meet Grief Karga, who is essentially the leader of the bounty hunter guild. And this was sort of an interesting play between the two of them. It adds a bit of context to the setting, that he offers him Imperial credits for the payment, and the Mandalorian doesn't want that because the Empire's dead. So we know that this is obviously post Return of the Jedi. The Empire is, if not dead, it's heading that way. I don't know if it quite is by that point. And so we meet him, and we see him hand off calamari flan, which was, oh my gosh, kind of
that
fun.
Was so distracting for me, because I was like, of course, if you're like a Star Wars fan, you're like, okay, I know what the mine calamari are, right? But then flan, he's like the calamari flan, and I'm just like, I have a Mexican background, and flan is like a Mexican dessert. So I was like, these are two foods, and they're currency in Star Wars. It was so distracting for me.
I like the Western element. So this is one thing I want to like. The two things that make really good Star Wars for me, apparently, are going back to Japanese storytelling and the gritty spaghetti Western stuff. Mm-hmm. So you have here the gritty spaghetti Western stuff, right? The post Union. The Union is the ruler now. The Confederacy's out. Confederacy credits are no good anymore. And that's kind of the feel you get from this thing, where he's going back and this guy's trying to offer him Confederacy credits after doing a job, and he's like, I'm not going to take those. Those aren't worth anything anymore. And then as we go through further, you guys had already kind of mentioned this concept of like the child following him around. Well, there's a whole series of manga called Lone Wolf and Cub that is all about an assassin that has a baby that he carries, or a young child, a toddler that he carries around with him everywhere. And I'm like looking at these things, and I'm like, yes, this is exactly how the first one was formulated from, the Hidden Fortress and that whole like Akira Kurosawa way of telling a story.
I actually, it's funny you should mention that, because I just had a note here. I saw on just one of the kind of reviews. They said that Pedro Pascal, who plays the Mandalorian, they said that what he did for most, like basically all of his prep for preparing for the role, was to just watch the old samurai films, the old Kurosawa films, and Clint Eastwood movies. He said that as he's getting ready for it, he said the quote was, he said, anytime I had a question or physical doubt about a moment, I was always like, what would Clint do? How would he shrug it off? How would Clint walk away from this?
There you go.
So I was like, that's good. I like to know that was formative.
Yeah, you can tell right away from the first episode, Dave Filoni's, so he directed the first episode. You can tell like this is his first live action, piece of work. But the pacing is very much like Rebels. It's very much like a animated, television show. It kind of, we jump from scene to scene. There's not a lot of dialogue. It's not too much exposition. Everything just kind of unfolds. It's easy to take in. And even a lot of, the cinematography, a lot of the shots were, like I said, it felt like, wow, okay, this is really Dave Filoni directing this. And then as we're going to the second episode, Rick Famuyiwa, if I'm pronouncing that right, directed that one. He directed a film called Dope, and he comes from more of a film background. And you can tell it was much more cinematic. Like we said, no dialogue for the first 10 minutes. Not too many animated shows do that. But he was able to pull it off, and I think as we go along and we see all the different directors that are going to put their hand in, I think you could tell Jon Favreau just kind of let them play with the material and put their stamp on it. And so far, I think because the episodes are a lot shorter than I thought they would be so far, I think it just allows every director the freedom to kind of just tell it how they want. It very much feels like a show where they just went out there and had fun, and were able to just stretch their directing muscles and kind of show off a little bit. And I think it's obvious that Favreau and company didn't put any restraints on them, because there are a lot of differences between how 1 and 2 are told creatively. So be interesting to see what happens going forward.
I liked one of the reviews that Mike, I think you sent out, was it made the reference that this is sort of like, it's like a sandbox of all these random Star Wars things all put together. And so it's like the directors kind of get their own little 30 minutes to just kind of play and do what they want. And it's really fun to kind of watch that unfold and to see where Dave and Jon Favreau's vision of it ends up going. So we come at this point more or less to meet the client. I think that's kind of how he's referenced. We don't really know who he is, but he has some connection to the Empire, or at least some connection to stormtroopers who are obedient to him. And Dr. Pershing, they both have this bounty that they're offering, very discreet. There's there's no puck, which is usually that device that would have the information on the bounty that they want acquired. There's no puck, but there is a location, a tracking fob, and they tell him that the bounty that they want them to procure is 50 years old. And Dr. Pershing wants the bounty alive, although the client says that proof of death can work for this.
Yeah, which is very interesting, I thought, where, obviously the client, who's a former Imperial, just adding that line there where it's like, yeah, but if you do kill him, if there's proof of death, that's okay too. Which it's very interesting because knowing, what we know about Yoda, the actual Yoda that we know, and how powerful he is, and whatever his species, ends up being, we're gonna find out in the show. Whatever they reveal to us, is very interesting. It's the fact that he doesn't mind if the baby died. It kind of tells you, like, well, is it something that they fear? Is it something that they want to eradicate, or is it something they want to learn from? Because obviously, the whole goal of the Empire was to eradicate the Jedi, and this creature being Jedi sensitive, is that their end goal? Is just to find every one of these creatures and get rid of them, or is there something more to it? So I felt like that was an interesting addition to that storyline.
When you see the difference between the two of them too, you see that the scientist wants it alive, maybe to be able to study it, but then the imperialist wants it, doesn't care. It's like, I understand where you're coming from. You might want to study this thing, but if it dies, that's okay too. That's really the end goal here, right?
Yeah, and it was interesting too, the 50 years old comment. At least from a watching audience perspective, that's an obvious misdirect. And of course, I had no idea, when the reveal happened, that it's actually a baby, and not only a baby, but a baby Yoda. So that was fun to be surprised at the end of the episode as he tracked to that little pod that had the baby. I kind of guessed in that moment what it was, but it wasn't up until then that I had any idea who the bounty actually was. Yeah.
Well, there's two things that really jumped out at me. It was just, first of all, like that whole scene with the client, like when he walks in, you see who's in there. First of all, Werner Herzog is just like terrifying for whatever reason. He's just really creepy.
Perfect for the role. Yeah.
Totally got that like escaped Nazi aesthetic. You know what I mean? Like they're not even hiding it. And he's sitting there and he has a huge imperial medallion on, you know, it's like he might as well be wearing a swastika, you know, like they really go for that. Like, here's this guy who's not gonna roll over. And I remembered years ago when they were releasing The Force Awakens, there was, you know, in some of the discussion about the plot, without giving too much away, I remember reading somewhere that J.J. Abrams had sort of said that when they were developing the plot for that and the First Order, you know, the basic mentality was like, what if the Nazis had, you know, some of them, enough of them had escaped World War II, and many did, and then sort of regrouped, you know, and kind of started it all over again. So like, I think that jumped out at me when I saw that scene, because it really, we don't know exactly how the First Order shows up. You know, we're a few decades before their ascendancy to their full power, but it's kind of like, it's making you think, or at least making me think like, okay, you know, where's this headed? And then somebody online, I don't know about this, but somebody was like freaking out because they said that the emblem on the Doctor's shoulder is the same as the cloners from like Camino.
Wow.
I don't know. so then of
now
course
we have to go back and watch this. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, no. Like, is it Yoda? Is it a clone of him? Like, I don't know. We'll just watch next week. Maybe we'll find some more. So I'm like salivating, but we'll see.
It's interesting. I think it's interesting too to like think maybe this is a splinter cell of the Empire that doesn't become the New Order, but that carries on the tradition of the Empire, because these are stormtroopers in the traditional sense of stormtroopers. And having seen the New Order troops, it's very jarring to go back and see now the stormtroopers still in play.
And I don't know if any of you have read the novels Aftermath.
No, I haven't read Aftermath.
And I'm blanking on character names, but that does talk about some of those. One of the admirals, she is, you know, still continuing to do her best to keep the Empire alive post Return of the Jedi. So this could have some connection to those stories as well. I'm not entirely sure yet what that would look like, but the novels as canon as well can play into these. But what's also interesting though is that the client has Beskar or a little block of Beskar steel or whatever metal alloy you want to call it, and he offers that as payment to the Mandalorian, and it obviously has significant impact on him, and it's sort of referenced that the Beskar actually belongs to the Mandalorians as a culture, as a people, and so that was interesting. I noticed that the Beskar had a little Imperial logo stamped into it as well, so there was a certain amount of satisfaction in the next scene when he goes to the place where all the other Mandalorians are, and the blacksmith melts it down and then makes a shoulder patch and gives that to the Mandalorian.
That was my favorite. I think that was one of, or my favorite scenes of the first episode, because we are seeing the Mandalorian culture really fleshed out in almost a religious way. And there's even a reference in the second episode to you know, Mandalorian religion, and you know, that whole concept of walking, you know, first of all going underground and then walking down this corridor that leads to like an altar type of situation with like a priestess, you know, who's wearing that fur cape or whatever it is.
My wife loves that.
Yeah. And so then it's like a ritual that you get that sense. I don't know if you guys got that sense that maybe he had done that before, where he goes, he presents the Beskar, they look at each other, right? They kind of like look at each other, acknowledge each other, and then he presents the Beskar. And it's like this almost holy exchange, or like I'm offering a sacrifice or something.
Well, and then she asked the question about whether he's gotten, what was it that she says, a totem or a...
has your signet been revealed? Has your signet been revealed?
Yeah. And that to me, that was such a cool moment where there's like, and he says no. And that added so much more just for him to say no. And then her to respond, well, it will be in time. You know, like there is this deep sense of ritual to what they're doing. And it's not just forging armor. It's so much more than that.
And that scene is where we get that, I think, personal connection to him, because we get that flashback from his childhood, right? At that point. And we see that, you know, he makes reference to being a foundling. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm wondering if he was Mandalorian to begin with, because it seemed to me in that flashback like he and his family were in like a village that was under attack, and his family was fleeing, but they obviously hid him. And I thought to myself, well, if they were Mandalorian people, I don't think they would just kind of be ambushed and then be running away from danger. It seems like Mandalorian people would be, prepared. They would have their armor, they would have their gear, they'd be fighting back. And just the clothing that they were wearing, it seemed to be, not something that we've seen before, I think, with the Mandalorians. So my kind of theory with this is that, he was a foundling. Somehow the people who are starting up, I guess, strengthening the Mandalorian people up again, found him, adopted him, raised him as a Mandalorian. And it seems to me like that being his background, then that makes him finding a child so much more important, significant for him as a character. So I love that we see that, and that again, it has that religious overtone too.
Yeah, that's me sitting here wondering what the RCIA process for Mandalorian looks like, and it becomes really interesting when you think about like, what does a kid have to go through to gain entrance into a cult like that is based around strength, honor, and the glory of battle. And yes, he's a foundling, but surely they put him through a really difficult trial to gain the armor, and then for him to bring back a piece of that culture to them in this, that it's a huge moment for him. That, I think as we learn more about this character, we're going to find out that the significance of this first episode is much bigger than even we think at this point.
They kind of feel like space Romans, don't they?
Yeah,
sort of.
Yeah,
or like Spartans actually might be even better.
There you go. Yeah,
that's kind of cool.
Well, and I wonder if we're going to see him eventually complete his armor and finish it. The other random thing about that I noticed is that his helmet is all one color. It's not painted. It's all basically that silver color. And when you look at Boba Fett and Jango Fett, they have colors marking them and distinguishing them. So I have no idea if that means anything or if that's just something that caught my eye. But maybe adding sort of distinguishing marks to his helmet is part of this whole process as well. So it is there that he then goes to the planet where the bounty is to be found. According to StarWars.com, I kind of looked at that. It's called Arvala 7. So he lands on this planet and hilariously is attacked by a blurg, which is just a fun name to say anyway. And I don't know if you guys noticed it or not, but the jump scare of that felt very, very much like the Tusken Raider jump scare with Luke Skywalker. So that was kind of fun.
Yeah.
We meet the Ugnaught. His name is Kuiil. I have no idea if I'm pronouncing that right, but he is the one who saves the Mandalorian from the assault of the blurg. And
I have spoken.
We have, the iconic line, it seems, of these episodes is "I have spoken."
And I love that it's Nick Nolte.
So awesome.
Right? And I hadn't caught that. And I was like, I know that voice. And I'm looking it up. I'm like, you kidding me? Like,
I saw the name in the credits and I was like, okay, there you go.
But he's such go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, and I had forgotten. They looked familiar. I had to look it up. And they were the little, the dudes in the sort of junk room in Bespin. So that's cool like, to bring another one of these races we've seen before, these species we've seen, but not in a long time,
Yep.
And they were used. Oh, sorry. I was going to say they were used a lot in Rebels and Clone Wars, the animated series.
Yeah. So it's interesting that we meet this Ugnaught, and he tells him that he has to use one of the blurg to get to the encampment where the bounty is to be found. And I found that whole scene just absolutely hilarious, where he has to try to tame the blurg.
Yeah.
And I don't know.
It was very Western. It was very like, and it goes back to that Clint Eastwood thing, where he's got to tame the horse and he's falling off. And I like the way this character that's such an amazing, awesome figure is kind of being just tossed around the whole time as he's going through this stuff. And it really makes him feel like someone we can relate to more than Boba Fett ever was. And even Jango Fett too, like more, we can really connect with him better.
Well, and he even at one point wants to just like quit, and Kuiil tells him, "Your ancestors rode the mythosaur," and prompts him to get back on the horse, so to speak, and try again. And the whole scene even just reminded me of a mechanical horse. If you've ever seen one of those sorts of devices to learn how to ride, that it was just it was comical, absolutely comical, but apparently necessary. I still am not sure why it was necessary to ride the Blurg and not just get a speeder bike, but that leads him. Yeah, true. So that leads him then to the encampment where the fob is saying that the bounty is found. And immediately as he's scoping it out, we see an IG battle droid, a bounty droid, rather. And it took me after the first showing to realize that is not IG-88.
Right.
If you were...
Yeah.
He seemed a bit too flighty for IG-88, but still pretty awesome.
Yeah. IG-11, I believe.
Self-destruct.
Right.
The moment with the self-destruct, that was classic. That was awesome.
Taika Waititi.
Yeah.
So that's IG-11. And the Mandalorian teams up with him, even though he wants to self-destruct, because apparently that's Bounty Hunter Guild protocol that he not be captured. And so his skill with a blaster was really cool to see. I really liked that scene a lot.
Oh, it was amazing.
And so then, of course, they wipe out all the mercenaries who are hanging out there, and they knock out the door with the giant Gatling blaster.
That's awesome.
Gun. Yeah.
Which this is back to Magnificent Seven. So we're going back to like the the classic the tropes for the spaghetti westerns and stuff, right?
Yeah. And then they encounter the pod with Baby Yoda. But what was interesting is when IG-88 or IG-11 and the Mandalorian both look at it, IG-11 was under the impression that he had to kill the baby.
Mm-hmm.
And the Mandalorian shoots him rather than let him kill the baby, and he takes possession of Baby Yoda.
Well, that makes me wonder who else is after this baby too, because it didn't sound like they had the same person hiring them.
It's an interesting question because they were both part of the Bounty Hunter Guild, though.
But this was an off the record, like there's no puck, right? And so one of two things was true. Either the client gave the puck to this IG-11 to go and take care of it, or and then when the Mandalorian came in and said, "Oh, this is a better option right here. Why don't we just hedge our bets and get both of them to go do it?" Right? Or there's somebody else that's after this thing that is actually wanting to kill it.
And we know many have tried before and ended up not making it.
Not the only one.
Making out. Yeah.
And not to get too far ahead, but I'm sure we'll get there in a second. But within episode 2, then we see there's even more people after the baby too, which I didn't catch that in the first watch through.
Yeah.
I just want to add something about the character of the Mandalorian that he doesn't like droids. And I thought perhaps that might be because of his childhood experience. Like maybe he grew up during the Clone Wars, perhaps, and his family was attacked by droids. Possibly.
Yeah, he clearly has a beef with droids because he asked for a vehicle with no droids, and he was very fearful of the IG-11 at first.
Do you guys remember? I forget what it was called, but the big, not the standard battle droids, but like the slightly bigger ones, kind of like the red eyes and kind of the flat head. I can't remember what they're called. And they kind of hold their arm out and shoot. And I just saw a freeze frame of it. It's hard to see, but in one of the trailers for the Mandalorian, you see some of them in the background. There's a question, are they still out there, or is that a flashback? So that might be part of it too.
Yeah. Any other final thoughts on the first episode before we jump into episode number 2?
I like the scene at the end where there's a moment where he puts out his finger and it's like this very Sistine Chapel moment of him reaching out to the baby and the baby reaching up to meet his finger. That was a great moment.
It also sort of felt like E.T.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
One thought that I had was when he was told, "Oh, your ancestors rode the great mythosaur," right? It seemed to almost like totally change his perspective. Like he seemed almost like spiritual even towards the Blurg, and I just found that so fascinating. Like, you know, he was like gentle with it, and he just his mindset and his attitude, everything seemed to change in him once he was told that particular line. And given the fact that he is a foundling and perhaps was kind of adopted into this Mandalorian culture, that, you know, your ancestors line, just, it's so fascinating to me. It just makes me think like, wow, this being a Mandalorian must really mean a lot to him, and it must really go very deep to that spiritual level. So I just wanted to add that too, that I hope that they continue to, you know, reveal more about that part of his personality.
Well, and it's fun that you mentioned that, because I mean, we could kind of use the same analogy for being Catholic. That being Catholic is not tied to, you know, a bloodline or anything, but it is who we are, and it should be very instrumental in how we act and why we act. And so obviously for the Mandalorian, his Mandalorian culture is very much his religion and his identity and who he is and why he's acting the way that he is. I think we'll see that challenge, though. We'll see how he relates with this baby or not. So, okay, well, then we'll jump into episode 2, which is interesting that episode 2 has a title. It's called The Child. Episode 1 didn't have any title at all. Obviously, that doesn't give us much to go on other than it's a reference to the baby Yoda. And it starts out with some more bounty hunters trying to capture baby Yoda. There's a couple Trandoshans who are attacking him, which is the same species as Bosk. And then we have an inkling of baby Yoda's potential force powers, because the Mandalorian is wounded in that battle, and baby Yoda keeps jumping out of his pod to try to help. And my immediate thought when I saw that was he's trying to use the Force to help him, because that's what it looked like he was doing, was reaching out his hand, not just a concern, but an attempt to use the Force.
And he's like straining, you know.
Yeah.
So cute.
Well, and it makes you wonder, like, what a 50-year-old toddler is capable of. You know, like, you've had 50 years. Surely you can do more than just waddle around quite so much. And so, you know, like, watching him get out of the pod and walk around, I think there's that natural tendency of us to look at things with big eyes and big heads that are too large for their bodies as babies. But this thing's 50 years old. Like, it's, you know, there's got to be a little bit of a survival instinct going on there.
It's not entirely helpless, in other words.
Yeah.
But gosh, is he so darn adorable. Or she, I don't actually know.
And he seems to be able to feed himself, too.
Yeah.
Yeah. The frog.
That frog was as big as he was. I was like, where did it go?
I just love the whole, like, spit that out. You know, it's just like...
But like any toddler, he like looks right back at him and like swallows it. Like, no, I'm not going to listen to you. Yeah. So the Mandalorian then tries to go back to his ship to head off world, and we have an encounter with the Jawas who are scavenging his ship, which was a very interesting move there. There's a lot of Tatooine sort of echoes here. Mm-hmm. The Jawas, the Sandcrawler. Even just the nature of the whole world seems to be fairly desert and rocky. But the Jawas are scavenging his ship. The Mandalorian is not at all merciful in trying to shoot some of them to stop them. And then we have this fantastic scene of him boarding the Sandcrawler and trying to get aboard to get his parts back.
Very Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade.
Yes, yeah. Exactly what I was
riding
thinking.
Indiana Jones riding that tank and the rocks approaching and that last second, you know, twist at the end. Yeah.
That and the Return of the Jedi too, where they're crawling up the side of Jawa's sand barge. You know, it's like that.
Yeah.
Just mash those two things together, and there we go. We got a great scene.
But it was super surprising too, because you don't expect the Mandalorian to fail.
Right.
And he climbs up and he is fighting his whole way up, and there's Jawas coming out of the side hatches and everything. And he gets up to the top, and there's just a bunch of them that just electrocute him and knock him off. And I almost felt bad for the Mandalorian, but on the flip side, it's like, well, he was trying to kill some of them, so
yes.
And these are red-eyed Jawas, right? And then the Jawas that we've seen before are yellow-eyed.
Oh, I hadn't even thought about that.
Yeah, so maybe there's different Jawa species, or
their cloaks are a little bit
that kind of gave
color.
me that's what kind of gave me the hint that we weren't on Tatooine, because I know there were some rumors that it might have been Tatooine, and then I know you mentioned, I think earlier, that you read somewhere that it might be some other planet. But yeah, I definitely hope it's not Tatooine, because I'd like to see Star Wars kind of expand and not keep the Star Wars universe so small. And I think we're already getting so many connections to the Star Wars lore that we don't need to bring everything back to Tatooine.
According to StarWars.com, a reliable source, it's Arvala 7.
There you go.
So,
I saw on Wikipedia earlier, it was funny that this came up because what is again, Arvala or Arvala?
Arvala
7?
Yep.
Arvala 7, because I was looking up Jawas, and it says in their description, it says that they're native to Tatooine, and conveniently enough, Arvala 7.
Hey, look at that.
So that might have just been changed like a week ago, but there you go. They live other places too.
Well, I could see them being total space rats, just like hiding out in the hull of a ship and landing somewhere else and going, we'll set up shop here.
Right.
Because they couldn't be native to really both of them. They kind of have to have a common origin at some point. So.
Right.
I would be on Jakku if I were them. There's lots of stuff there.
Lots of good stuff there. Exactly.
So after that horrendous defeat by the Jawas, he goes back to his ship, finds it completely scavenged and worthless, and he decides to go to his one friend on the whole planet, and it's Kuil, the Ugnaught.
I love that he's incapable mechanically. That to me is a nice touch. Like you see so many of these characters seem to be ace pilots, great fighters, and they can fix anything. And it's like, this guy, no, he's like, I don't know how to fix a ship. What am I going to do with this? This is a hunk of junk now.
Well, and that speaks to the Ugnaughts, just their culture or whatever. When they're on Bespin, they were obviously the mechanics of the Cloud City. So the fact that Kuil knows exactly how to fix this ship didn't come as a complete surprise to me once he gets all his parts back. But it's also fun to note that Kuil is completely generous. He wants to help the Mandalorian get his ship parts back. He doesn't want anything from it. All he wanted was peace brought to his world. So the Mandalorian offers him all sorts of rewards for his help and offers him first mate even. But he turns it down. So they go to the Jawas, the Ugnaught, Kuil being the mediator between them, and that was another fun scene of them requiring the Mandalorian to put down all his guns before he approached him. And they try to come to an agreement in order to get his parts back, and they decide to settle on an egg, which was just weird.
And the Jawas are way too excited about it for it to be good.
Well, and
for the Mandalorian.
Right.
I was expecting they wanted the egg in order to tame the beast and raise it.
Yes, exactly. And then nope, that was not the goal. But it so much fits with the Jawas, with Star Wars, that just unexpected offbeat. I went through all of this for that. Okay, great.
Yeah, it fits them. So
the whole thing.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. The whole thing was, to me, very Star Wars, because in past, especially in the Clone Wars, George Lucas and Dave Filoni really explore the theme of other cultures and nonviolent approach to conflict resolution. And to me, that was expressed in this little scene where the Mandalorian is made to abandon everything that to him is important and that he values and he has to meet the other people on their own terms. So that's something that he's not used to. But to me, that was very, very Star Wars.
Right. And you'll notice that the weapons that they use are non-lethal weapons, too. The Jawas, the cannons that they use are ion cannons, and it knocks him out, but it doesn't kill him. And they definitely had him at a moment right there where they could have.
And he already killed a bunch of them.
And he'd already killed some of them.
So.
And Khalil also tells him, like, the Jawas don't destroy, they steal.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah, that was a really important note about their culture, too.
Yeah. I loved when they're pulling up and he's just like, they really don't like you. Well, I may have disintegrated some of them.
But they're willing to work with him.
Yeah. Good for them.
Man, that gun is awesome.
It really is.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so they take the Mandalorian and Kuiil to the lair of this beast that they want the egg from. It's apparently called a mudhorn, and it was funny to note that the Mandalorian, when he was riding in the sandcrawler, is quite a bit too tall. So he actually is hitting his head on the ceiling of the cockpit of the sandcrawler. But he gets to this lair and he approaches the mudhorn and gets completely trashed by the mudhorn.
Didn't you guys love that?
I
totally loved it.
It was brutal. It was so good. Well to have it like from Baby Yoda's perspective first, where you just see the cave and like blaster.
Yeah, right.
Just comes flying. That was great. That something about that was very Han-like to me. Like just a little like the clumsiness of it, the like I got myself into something that I didn't anticipate.
Runs into a room of stormtroopers and fires and runs away.
Yep,
exactly. Well, and then in the end of it, like all of his technology doesn't save him. Like all of the weapons he has doesn't end up doing him any good because this thing is just it's nature versus this man that's full of all the technology and war information of his race, and he can't beat it.
And then we have the reveal of Baby Yoda's powers, or at least part of his powers. He stops the mudhorn with the Force, raises him off the ground, and then the Mandalorian actually kills it with his knife.
And I'm
tiny little knife.
Sap. I'm such a huge sap as I guess just as a dad of a little girl or whatever. I don't know. It's just like. And the little guy just gets all tuckered out. And passes out.
I know. That was so adorable.
And then he sleeps through the entire rebuilding of the ship. Doesn't wake up at all.
Yeah.
So he uses the Force, saves the Mandalorian. Again, that sort of, he's already speaking to the relationship between Baby Yoda and the Mandalorian, that obviously Baby Yoda cares for the Mandalorian as his caregiver. And I think that'll endear the Mandalorian even more to Baby Yoda, and we'll see where that relationship goes. They go back to the ship, put it back together. Kuiil helps with all the mechanical parts of it, and again, that was where that we had this whole exchange between him and the Mandalorian about offering for payment, and I kept being struck by Kuiil's generosity, and at one point he says, "You are my guest. I am in your service." And that was a great line that speaks very much of Benedictine hospitality,
right?
Of being hospitable and giving of your all to your guests. So that was pretty cool.
To me, it just spoke of Middle Eastern hospitality. Having been to the Middle East, it's a lot of part of my job too. So, yeah, I mean, that whole, I think for him, the Ugnaught culture is sort of like, we don't really know too much about it, but we just know that they're handy and that they've been slaves. Right. And so he talks about how he's worked his whole life to get out of servitude. And yet, like, he is so generous in serving others. So that really said a lot.
Can we go back to the egg?
Yeah.
Because I really love the scene of the Jawas just eating the egg. I thought they were like, they're probably like we said earlier, they're either gonna tame the beast, and let it hatch and tame the beast, or they were just gonna smash it.
Or they're gonna sell it. I thought they were gonna sell it. I thought they were just gonna take it off in a thing and then it's something they're gonna sell. But nope, that wasn't it.
Well, I thought it was a nice touch too that like this, not to rip on any other series, but my wife is a big Harry Potter fan, and I got her like the big like the book of like the Fantastic Beasts, and it's like this, you go through it all, but so many of them are just like, I don't know who actually did the artwork, but they're just like normal, like regular earthly animals with like an extra feather or something. Like it just doesn't seem too creative. So I thought, like, here's this thing that looks basically like a giant rhino, like, but not really. And then they give it an egg, and it's a furry egg. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's different.
Furry egg,
yeah, furry egg. That's Star Wars. Like I don't know. It's just another one of those little details.
I think that like when you come back up to the end scene, it's really interesting to see this character that's so much of a loner, and now he's starting to reach out, and he's offering a position on his ship to this Ugnaught that he's, essentially just met, really, but he's starting to open up in some interesting ways that I'm looking forward to seeing that develop more.
Yeah, I think that's one of my biggest excitements for the character, is to see that develop. Yeah, he's going to kind of essentially build his armor, but let down his inner armor, hopefully.
Right.
So that's pretty much the end of the episode. They blast off into space, and assumingly they're heading back to deliver the bounty, but we won't know until this week.
And little baby Yoda wakes up.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Right.
So what do you guys have any kind of general observations that you'd like to share over both episodes, or even the second episode?
Could I just say something real quick about the music?
Oh, yes.
Because that's a whole other can of worms. But the only thing I wanted to say about it was, like, the main theme, and it really hit me in a particular moment. The two moments that struck out from the first episode, and of course now I'm just kind of going deeper into the themes and stuff. But when he first it's silent, when he's out in the snow. And even like Rogue One, this has some similarities with that kind of feel. But like Rogue One, it didn't give us a scroll, but it still started us in space, and then we kind of come down. But this was cool, where it's just like, bam, you're with him. He's right there, and then it's silent, and you don't even notice that there's no music until like when the door opens up and he's standing there and that weird like recorder thing's playing.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw an interview with Ludwig Göransson, who did the music, and he said that, it was such a tall order to do this. And he said the first thing he did was he ordered a box of recorders, because he thought to himself, what's the least Star Wars sounding instrument I can think of? And that's what came to mind. So he sits around playing around with it, just like, okay, what can I do with this? And that's how he developed that really cool tribal kind of recorder thing that's going through it, which really works. And then the other song during the end credits, that's like the main Mandalorian theme. I don't know about you guys, but it's totally like Temple of Doom and the Ewok theme, like kind of combined, like it's, so it's some of that Indiana Jones element to it too, which is cool, and a good hat tip to John Williams,
Yeah, well, and it feels decidedly small screen.
Yeah,
without feeling like it's lost anything Star Warsy, which I like. It's not this huge fanfare that's like really big and about like the main arc story, but it still really feels like you're in that same long ago and far away place.
Yeah, in fact, the story arcs so far have been fairly simplistic. Go get the bounty and then recover his ship parts. That's kind of the essential parts of both episodes. And yet, it still has this grand feel to it without it being over the top.
Yeah, that's the one thing, like, as much as, I like that aspect of the show, the whole feel of it, I feel like if I had like one sort of like knock on the show so far, it's not really a knock, maybe just observation so far, is that I think the story needs to be pushed a little further in the upcoming episodes, because at least in my opinion, the second episode, as much as I loved it, I even thought it was better than the first one. I think if we have more episodes like that, and for it just being, what is it, eight episodes for season one?
Yeah.
If we just have more episodes like that, it might feel like there's not much story. It's more like day in the life, of the, of the Mandalorian and Baby Yoda. The show reminds me a lot of like a RPG. It's like a hero's encounter, just on this journey, and then just encountering, this person in that situation. So I just hope, I think like if those episodes like came out all at once, it's more if it was like a more bingey type of show where you could watch all the episodes, I think it would work. Staying with that sort of course, but I feel like, and like I said earlier, I think with the different directors coming on, I think every episode is going to have its own sort of feel, and I hope that we're getting more story and we can dive in more into this world, and without keeping it too simplistic, because there's so many possibilities now. Like there's another Yoda with force powers, and we have a Mandalorian, trying to encountering something that's totally beyond his understanding and his culture. Hopefully it's something that expands a lot more in the upcoming episodes.
I like that it's giving us questions about the things that already exist too, because this was my big question, and this was we talked a little bit about this before the show, but what kind of Mandalorian was Jango Fett? Because we find out throughout this series that a Mandalorian never takes off their helmet, that their weapons are, to put their weapons aside is a disgrace to their religion. And yet, when we see Jango Fett on the clone city, he has no weapons, he has no armor, he's completely exposed to everything, and then all the clones, same thing. And the clones seem to kind of follow that rule throughout the Clone Wars too, that they always keep their helmets on. But then you have the characters like Rex and some of the other clones that end up taking their helmets off and becoming more named figures as they become more known by the Jedi. So it's really kind of interesting to look at this character as, Jango Fett is a fallen away Mandalorian. Like he was a Mandalorian perhaps, and then lost his way. And that's how he ended up at Kamino, cloning himself and making this whole army.
Well, maybe that's why Prime Minister Almec says, Jango Fett was just a common bounty hunter. He was never a Mandalorian. He stole that armor. I don't know. He said like how he happened upon that armor. I have no idea, or something like that.
My question going forward is Baby Yoda related to Yoda?
It's a good question.
Very good question.
Or is the inherent force ability unique to that species?
And the only other one of them we've ever seen, as far as I know, in the films is Yaddle. I don't even know if they name her. You just see her off in the distance in the Jedi Council. But all the expanded universe stuff, there were other, like I think there was at least one other one, but it's like they're deliberately mysterious, So kudos to Jon Favreau for opening that one up.
Well, and so unexpected.
Oh yeah.
Well, my kids are great, because my kids, first off, they caught the fact that it's 50 years old, but it's Yoda. So they knew, Yoda was really old. And then, a couple of them are like, well, maybe now we'll find out what the name of Yoda's species is, because they're going to have to reference that at some point in this series, right?
Good job, Dad.
Yes. And my mind was blown because somebody pointed out that this is set, I think they said it's 5 years after Return of the Jedi, which means that if Baby Yoda's 50, he and Anakin were born at around the same time.
Yeah, I was just going to bring that up. I read that too. Yeah.
So now there's questions over, like, is there something going on with that? Is he like, someone compared it, they said, is this like a Neville Longbottom and another Harry Potter reference? Is like the backup chosen one or something? Like, who
another
knows?
Virgins in the Force?
Right. I don't know.
All good questions.
I think again, talking about the Star Wars universe is expanding. The fact that there's another creature like Yoda out there that could be impacting a whole nother part of the universe, it just tells you like how, the possibilities are just endless, because the fact that, I mean, obviously we're going to see where his story goes, but the fact that, Yoda being such a huge influence in the episodic, series and the animated series and all the lore and the different novels and stuff like that, the fact that we never saw another one like him, and we're just being introduced to him now, shows that they can just go anywhere with this. So that makes it really exciting.
Absolutely.
I can't wait to hear Baby Yoda's first words either, because I want to know, does he follow the same speech pattern?
Right? Yeah.
As Yoda.
All the memes out on the internet seem to imply that he's going to have the same backwards talk as Yoda.
There you go.
Cool. Any other final comments before we wrap up this episode?
Well, the only thing I would say is that whoever Baby Yoda is in the show, he's the greatest toy ever made. So, and they knew what they were doing with that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's again, the fact that, obviously there's going to be Baby Yoda toys coming out, but usually how a lot of things leak in Star Wars is when toy designs come out, because there's no, for some reason, toy companies have like the worst, way of securing that information. It always comes out because, marketing has to create the ads for them and everything. So the fact that it didn't come out, it's obviously Disney is able to do this. They're like, okay, we'll miss out on all the money we could make on releasing these toys, for
right. Well, right now,
it's probably not gonna be ready for the holidays. I'm guessing since we haven't it hasn't come out. So they're missing out on that money so they could save that reveal. So I good on them for doing that.
They'll still sell tons of Baby Yoda.
Absolutely, absolutely. I don't feel sorry for them. I'm glad that they humble themselves, that much to keep it a surprise.
Yeah. Cool. Well, that's it from us. What did you think of the first 2 episodes of The Mandalorian? Be sure to email us or comment on our Facebook or Twitter page and let us know. You can email us any feedback at starwars@sqpn.com, and you can find us on Facebook by going to facebook.com/StarQuestMedia. And you can also find us on Twitter at SQPN. We'd like to take a moment and thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create The Secrets of Star Wars, including Michael F., Jonathan R., Bob M., Joe B., and Sean M. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue The Secrets of Star Wars and all the shows here at StarQuest. You can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. Be sure to subscribe to the show in Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or also on the SQPN YouTube channel. And also to find any previous episodes of The Secrets of Star Wars, please visit us at sqpn.com/Star Wars. And so we'll be back next week when we will be discussing the 3rd episode of The Mandalorian. And so until then, Mike Creevy, thanks for joining me and sharing the secrets of Star Wars.
My pleasure.
Andrew Hermes, thank you as well for joining us.
I have spoken.
Thomas Sanjurjo, thanks as well for being with us.
May the Force be with you all.
And with your spirit.
And with your spirit.
And Angela Ciolana, thank you as well for joining us.
Thanks, guys. It was a pleasure to be here.
And once again, I'm Father Andrew Kinstetter. Thank you for listening to The Secrets of Star Wars on StarQuest.